Howdy, folks. Let's continue our vocabulary learning journey with Dr. Sam Harris. By the way, the words with plenty of example sentences will be in the discussion. I also recommend that you check out the full interview, which is on YouTube if you're interested in the topic. Let's do
Do
this.
agree with that assessment, but one of the things it's criticized for is that it sort of knocks down this grand structure of religion and fails to erect anything in its place. Right. The moral landscape was at least an attempt to do that, so that's one thing that I like about it. I suppose, do you agree with that assessment of New Atheism?
That it's passé, or
Passé is the first word of the lesson. What does it mean? It means old-fashioned, no longer relevant. So if you say that this movement, this idea is passé, it means that it is no longer something that people resonate with. It could be obscure and no longer interesting. Let's pronounce it together. Passé, passé.
That it's something of a time gone by.
Well, I think it was, I mean, I never felt that it was more than it was, which was mostly just a publishing phenomenon. I mean, the four of us had published books in quick succession, and that is me and Richard Dawkins and Dan Dennett and Christopher Hitchens. And then people began to treat us like a four-headed atheist, as though we agreed about everything, which of course we don't. But we agreed about most things relevant to the debate around reason and faith and science and religion. Modulo a few things that...
Modulo is a term. It's a specialist term that people use to talk about what remains in mathematics. So for instance, when you do a division, the number that remains, that is modulo. In this debate, he uses this word to talk about the exceptions. They agree on most things, modulo a few things, and he's going to talk about that.
A few positive things I would want to put in place of the sort that you just referenced. I mean, an objective construal of...
An objective construal. Construal is interpretation or understanding. An objective construal. It is not subjective. That people do not necessarily have their different opinions. So this is something which is grounded in reality. It is objective. An objective construal of
morality and value, right and wrong, good and evil, and also a contemplative life. I mean, I used spirituality in scare quotes in my book, Waking Up, trying to revive that term.
He was trying to revive that term. He was trying to bring that term back to life, to breathe life into that term, spirituality, to revive that term. This is a verb.
So I think that was pretty quixotic.
But he admits that this was pretty quixotic, which is our next word of the lesson. It means it was a little unrealistic. It was perhaps a little optimistic. So it sounds like he's not quite pleased with that term spirituality, which is used in the book.
I don't tend to use the term spirituality myself anymore, but what I meant to say is that there's a clearly an understanding of the furthest reaches of human well-being that we can arrive at ultimately, whether we have it in hand now, that is deeper than culture, that's not parochial, it's not
parochial, it's not limited, it is not narrow-minded. We use this word again to criticize an idea or criticize the interpretation of a particular phenomenon. Parochial, let's pronounce it together. It is not narrow-minded.
Merely a matter of anyone's invention, but it actually speaks to some universal truths about the possibilities of human consciousness and even beyond, conscious machines if we ever build them, etc.
So he is hinting at a deeper form of reality, which is not culture dependent, which is not based on a religious thinking framework.
All of that relates, I think we're going to talk about the moral landscape, all of that relates to questions of value as I construe them. And
so we talked about the noun construal. Its verb form is construe, which means to understand or interpret the way that he views these ideas.
How a completed science of the mind could ultimately understand them.
And the moral landscape is something of an attack on relativism. This idea that seems quite popular among secular ethicists, that there's no way to, I suppose, objectively measure different value judgments against each other. I think it's clear that everybody values something. Even if just subjectively, you need to have some kind of motivation to do essentially anything in the world. The interesting question is how we can measure these against each other and determine which one is actually true. And the big selling point of the moral landscape is that this is something we can do with science. So I figured the thread would be a good place to start because it's something of a summary.
Sure.
I suppose we can go through and see who caves in.
Yeah.
Cave in means to yield. So he's going to go through that thread. He's going to discuss this topic in more detail and see which side Sam Harris or this gentleman caves in, which one admits that maybe their argument is somewhat flawed. I hope you've learned at least one word with my video lesson.